Welcome back. So as we have been reporting in the news, Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize is today expected to appear before Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Health to, among others, respond to allegations of his involvement in the irregular multi-million rand digital vibes contract. This as pressure has been mounting on President Cyril Ramaphosa to act against Mkhize following his admission that the awarding of a 150 million rand tender to communications company Digital Vibes was irregular. Now, the tender was for services related to the NHI, that's the National Health Insurance Scheme, and later included government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, to add to Minister Mkhize's troubles, the Democratic Alliance yesterday also laid criminal charges against him and the Director General of Health, Dr. Sandile Buthelezi, in line with the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act of 2004. Let's get a bit of analysis and talk about what is at stake for Minister Zweli Mkhize's political career, as well as his position as the Health Minister. We are joined by governance specialist Sandile Buthelezi from the Wits School of Governance and Sanusha Naidu, who's a political analyst from the Institute for Global Dialogue. Always amazing having both of you. Thank you very, very much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Leanne, and thank you for the invitation.
So let's, Sandile, let me throw it to you. President Cyril Ramaphosa confirming that he has spoken to the Minister of Health and he's dealing with the matter, and there is full cooperation from the Minister. Is this enough for the public, or should there be more done, even though the President has said he's waiting for the full investigation before he acts?
In a way, it could be enough. Bear in mind that the Public Finance Management Act, Section 86, and in fact Chapter 10 as a whole, deals with financial misconduct, and it details what sort of things should be done. But what is also very interesting there is that once a gross negligence or willful dereliction of duty or criminal behavior is found, then the affected parties could be sentenced up to 5 years. So there is a law. If President Cyril Ramaphosa actually tells us as the public that the law, especially the PFMA and the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act, are being allowed to take their course relative to the Director General and the Minister Zweli Mkhize, then certainly we should be satisfied with that. It is the discretion of the African National Congress and Cyril Ramaphosa himself to say, do you keep him in the cabinet? But as long as the hawks are on his trail, we should be happy.
Yeah. Sanusha, do you share the same view?
Yeah, I think, Leanne, it's between a rock and a hard place. It's a bind. It's a dilemma. Because at the same time, I think what Sandile is referring to is really the application of those two acts, of those two pieces of legislation, and the way that is then interpreted in the context of the investigation that we're possibly seeing with the SIU. So that's the one avenue that the president has been indicating, that he wants that process around the investigation, which has been a kind of deepening and escalating, and we hear from the MPA, from the spokesperson from the SIU that they are at a critical stage within that investigation. So I think once that comes through, then you can interpret how these pieces of legislation that we have governing accountability, transparency, and acts of misconduct, and particularly in this case, how you actually apply that. On the other hand, there's the court of public opinion. There's the fact that the bind that comes that the president finds himself in is that he's come in on this very, very important moral ticket of an anti-corruption drive. This has been part of his campaign. This has been the new dawn kind of trajectory in which he has brought in the whole kind of presidency of his administration. So I think at the same time, in that context, the question is, how do you apply consistency, uniformity? And the real threat in this context is when it comes to a cabinet minister of this caliber, who is quite an important individual, high up in the president's administration, but also playing a pivotal role in the context of our pandemic. What do you do in that context? Do you actually succumb to what people are saying is apply your views, Mr. President, on this, on the basis that, it's not about friends, it's not about this, it's not about that, it's not about the party, but it's about the integrity of the state and it's about the integrity of your administration. I think yesterday when he was addressing the parliamentary media group, he made a very interesting statement, when they asked him about the reshuffle of cabinet. He said, it's the president's job to do that, and it's the president's job to decide when that will happen. And I think that in itself is a telling kind of dilemma that the president finds himself in, because this hits very close to home for him. It's not somebody that is working within an opposing faction in the ANC, or is, the consistency around this issue is that he is now having to deal with a minister that's close within his National Command Council. It's about the whole question of the vaccine rollout, etc. Yes, he did address it. He said, we've got processes and issues in place where we can deal with the rollout. It won't affect. But I think this is a much more closer hit to home, because it's about what are you going to do, because this is about your administration, your cabinet.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, you can see that this is a very difficult situation. I mean, we've obviously now been seeing a lot of other scandals that have been coming to the fore, and many people have been speaking, that these are things that have been following Dr. Mkhize for a while, and yet, he got ahead. He, of course, is the health minister. He's dealing with a pandemic at the moment, which we'll talk to in a short while. But let's look back at some of those scandals that have followed the minister when he was still the ANC Treasurer General. From what he has said, how he's reacted to this latest scandal, do you think he's convincing enough? Sandile, I don't know if you want to jump in here.
Yes, thank you. I think we can start right where we are. From a scandal perspective and an integrity perspective, Dr. Zweli Mkhize is in a very muddy place. Once it emerges, as it has already done, that he personally benefited through his son, through renovations to his house in this scandal, but at the same time in the Zondo Commission, when journalists started to report on those things, when they drew a map, some of the money that came out of the asbestos case, for which Isma Khashule is charged, some of it ended up, interestingly, in Zweli's hold, and also Paul Mashatile. Those are the two, the one being the previous Treasurer General of the African National Congress, the other one being the current one. And all that Zweli Mkhize could say was that this was money that was used for purposes of the ANC and so on and so forth. So there is the difficulty when money start coming in your personal direction, and then indeed it shows that you are occupying office for personal enrichment. You cannot say there was a big political and ideological battle you are fighting that caused you to have your renovations into a luxury townhouse in Bryanston being done by through public funds or by service providers of the public sector in your department. So his image is tarnished, but we must locate that within the framework that the African National Congress itself has admitted that it is accused, number one. And we also know that in terms of corruption, we also know that in the process of raising funds for the ANC, you take a portion for yourself. I'll stop there.
Yeah, I know you want to talk about this. I can see you dying to speak. Sanusha, talk to us.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I can't disagree with that, because it's not just about one particular scandal. It seems to be a set of scandals in that context. I mean, I think at one point at the Zondo Commission, even the former Transnet CEO, Lucky Montane, kind of implicated some link to Minister Mkhize. And then, of course, there's the Hitachi scandal again. So this comes back to a deeper set of issues and conditions that afflict the party. The president mentioned this when he appeared before the Zondo Commission and talked about this whole thing around party political funding and how do you actually galvanize that space, and whether you need, the legislation we have now that will actually hopefully create more accountability of how political parties get their funding and who are, and where these funding sources come from is very important. But it also raises a bigger existential crisis, if that's the right way to put it, for the president. Because, on the one hand, if everybody in the ANC has to follow the kind of moral code that the president is setting within the party, then I think we're going to have a very different kind of architecture within the party. We're going to have a very different kind of architecture within the state, because, again, we come back to that very, very gray area between where the state begins and where the party ends, or where the party begins and where the state ends, because it's a revolving door. So at the end of the day, the challenge for this moral ticket that you use is that you got to choose who's going to basically be the ones you're going to take on in terms of this whole process. But with this case, you got a minister who is sitting in a context where he's going to go before the parliamentary committee this morning, and I definitely is going to be this whole issue is probably going to basically be more overwhelming. There are going to be more questions. We can bet the DA and other opposition parties are going to raise this more than about his performance, about the rollout of the pandemic, the rollout of the vaccines, addressing the pandemic, and all of these things, because this is now where Parliament will also try and exercise its oversight. So it's going to be a very important and a very, very critical space for him to see how he navigates this.
Yeah,
and I guess the last point to make here is, what is the moral decision that Minister Mkhize needs to make in this whole process?
And that's what is key to all of this as well, isn't it? So, you talk about that we're going to be taking that live. It'll happen just after 8 o'clock. You also mentioned the DA. So let's just focus on what they have gone and done now. So as we've been reporting, they laid criminal charges against the Minister and the Director General, because it's important to note that the Director General, and some saying, the Director General should be the one, if he okayed what was going on with Digital Vibes. Basically, the DA saying that they're acting in accordance with the Prevention of Combating of Corrupt Activities Act of 2004 that has been contravened. Is the DA jumping the gun? And should Dr. Mkhize not be given just the opportunity to plead innocent until found guilty by the SAU before law enforcement agencies jump in? Or is there room for a criminal investigation here?
Yes. There is plenty of room for criminal investigation. The DA is correct. And it is still a very unfortunate situation that it is usually the DA that goes to report these cases, which do need to be reported. And the law, there is a criminal section in the PFMA, which is Section 86 and Chapter 10 of the PFMA. So those are criminal cases. Now, the Auditor General has already pronounced herself on this issue. And then the SIU is following a forensic audit, which is based on additional allegations that have emerged after the Department of Health, where Sandile Buthelezi and Dr. Zweli Mkhize had already launched an internal forensic audit, which found a lot of wrongdoing. Let me quickly also add that I found the comments from the Director General, Sandile Buthelezi, interesting when he pointed out that Dr. Mkhize signed documents related to this procurement long before, in fact, without the assistance of the Director General. So we may find that the DG may throw Dr. Mkhize under the bus as things go on. But certainly the DA is on the right track, and I am hoping every day that the African National Congress leaders will start taking their own members to the police station and reporting them. Because that is how you fight corruption, when cadre and comrades report each other to the police and take decisive action against each other themselves through the proper and lawful processes.
Yeah, and I had to giggle there for a second, Sandile. That was, interesting one. But, Sanusha, let's talk about this now. The public, I haven't in a while seen South Africans this upset about this allegation of corruption for many reasons. I mean, this is our health minister who we've been listening to from the beginning of this pandemic, and we've been really following, seeing him. He's been the face of all the information that we need. So obviously he's now absent from these public engagements. We haven't seen him in a while. What does he do? Because I just can't imagine that the public are going to accept him staying on. Because if you have these allegations in a time where every cent is needed to fight this pandemic, whether we talk PPE, vaccines, hospitals. I mean, I've heard horror stories of late of what's happening inside of hospitals, and yet a digital vibe company gets paid millions upon millions to just organize an interview that would be done for free and has been done for free. You know, where does the public come into all of this and trust during a pandemic?
Well, firstly, Leanne, the trust has completely gone out of the window. If anything, the trust was always getting deeper and deeper into a quagmire. And right now, this has just completely defined what the level of distrust is with the state. More importantly, I think the dilemma for Minister Mkhize is that even if you say, let's let the whole process of, innocent until proven guilty, the forensic audit that the SIU is doing, the criminal case that the DA has instituted, all of this doesn't bode well for reputation. I mean, even if he comes out of this just by a modicum of whatever, it doesn't necessarily, it's not a win for him, in my opinion, on a moral ticket, or whether on the basis of trust from the South African public, or even in the context for the party. Because at the end of the day, the reputational risk that you have now brought to the party, the reputational risk you have brought to yourself, doesn't mean that we're always going to see the minister in that light. We're going to constantly remember him for all of these scandals, but more importantly, whatever the forensic audit and other investigations will prove. Again, we've got to see what happens in the ANC. I like the points Sandile made in terms of saying, ANC members need to hold their own colleagues accountable and do the right thing. We have an integrity commission in the ANC. We've got to see how that plays out as well, because I think there is this little kind of issue that is the minister being charged with something, and therefore you've got to see how the rules of the set aside and what all of these things are being applied. But I think at the end of the day, for the minister, I'm not sure how he comes back from this. If indeed they say he does say, but he's been proved innocent, or the allegations are not substantive, which I'm beginning to see every single day with the reporting that the entanglements are becoming deeper and more disturbing. I don't see how he comes back from that. Even if he does find a way, or the reporting says, or the investigation says that he hasn't basically done anything untoward, or it was basically all done in a kind of unconscious way, it's very difficult to do that. So I don't know where this goes, but I think the only way we can see ourselves out of this now is what kind of action is taken, or what kind of implementation of some kind of sanction is taken in terms of between now and the SIU report. Unfortunately, I think that this is going to be something that's going to stay with us, and I think the public has just become more frustrated, like they do with the fact that we are supposed to be having an ESCOM that works for us, and it doesn't work for us. So everything is broken, and people are just frustrated. Yeah,
or taps that don't work for us either. That's another issue we're dealing with. Sandile, let me leave this final word to you as we head up to 7. We've got not too long. Please, less than a minute on this one. So I've read I read the Mail and Guardian article. The Mail and Guardian are reporting that the minister is apparently, according to their sources, ready to step down. President is saying, don't, just hang on. Let's see what the investigation yields. And it's a very difficult time. So, in the shoes of the minister, what would you do? What is the right thing to do? And who could fit into this position if, in fact, Mkhize does step aside?
I think we must look at this as Cyril Ramaphosa as being a captain of the team. He wants his team to play well. I don't think that he wants to change the minister when we're entering the third wave, etc., etc. So Dr. Zweli Mkhize has got to pay attention as well to whatever the president may request him to do. And our people, the general public, has got to trust that due process is going to follow. Just by way of closure, corruption, by the way, under this Prevention of Corrupt Activities Act and Practices Act, that carries 15 years in jail. The PFMA carries 5 years in jail. So what Zweli Mkhize is facing is not small. Even if it might take more than 2 years to get him there, he'll get there. I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you. Sandile Buthelezi, political analyst, Anusha Naidu, political analyst from the Institute for Global Dialogue. Thank you for talking to us about a very, very important issue, one that's going to be taken further after 8 this morning, as, of course, we've got that in our news bulletin. Sakina standing by. Here's your news.